We are live on Facebook and Speak Impact and Build Your Tribe with Drew Tadia. Welcome, Drew.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Happy we got this all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. A few technical issues, but we are here with everyone, and we're so thrilled that we could bring this to everyone. And I just want to say a few words about Drew before we get going. Drew, former pro athlete, health coach, who also hosts his own podcast and radio show for about 7 years, syndicated, basically a ninja, as he says in his bio. I love that. He's a ninja of all sorts. And Drew, I want you to add in something that I may have forgotten. What's something about you that a lot of folks, even your audience, doesn't know about you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I just put out a video about how I catch flies with my bare hands. So that's something. I think that's something people already know, but it's true. It has been a long time dream of mine to teach myself how to do a front flip. So I did that this past year. And then I always had like a ninja. I'm very Eastern philosophical, and make up words sometimes. And
whatever.
This is going to be lots of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
So tell us about your podcast before we go into the nitty gritty about what folks can learn from you, and how to pitch. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. I want you to make sure that listeners and viewers here really understand what you offer there.
Okay. So first of all, I started off in the radio industry, and I was traveling as a professional athlete. Everyone told me that you need to, I should say, in between seasons, I stopped, and I always say that they paid us enough money to keep us hungry. So it wasn't exactly as lavish as everyone likes to think it is. But I needed to work in between seasons. I needed a job. So I thought I should start my own business. I had no idea how challenging it was going to be. And one of the things that everyone said is that people read the newspaper and they listen to the radio. So I was like, perfect. I'll start writing articles and they'll publish them, which they did. And then I said, I'll jump on the radio and then they can hear me too. And then it was actually, so I went into the radio station, no radio experience, no real experience other than playing a professional sport that I love dearly. And I said, I got this great idea. I'm going to trade you my expert tips for airtime.
Hey, that still works today, right?
I thought it was a great idea. And they said, actually, that's not how it works. So they said, no, that's not how it works. You can actually pay for airtime here. And I didn't have any money. So I was like, well, that's not going to work. So I went back into the station, and it took a couple weeks, couple months. And I asked my producer, I asked him a couple years later, why did you make this show happen? He said, well, when I realized you weren't going to go away, I figured that we should come up with a solution to have you on the show. On the station. So
persistence. Nice.
That's how, and that's something I'm going to talk about today, but persistence is how anything really comes up in life. And I think that if you're not willing to put in that time and effort to be persistent, it's going to be challenging to see results.
Awesome. I love hearing your story and just how you figured it all out, because I was probably the same way as a up and coming journalist, trying to figure it all out and, sending out resume tapes and just really relentless in doing it. So I can totally understand where you were coming from and where your mindset was at the time, where you just said, I'm not going to give up. Somebody's going to give me a chance. So good for you that you made it. Now you're 7 years in the game. And I know that you've learned a ton since then. You're seasoned in what you're doing. Tell me about what turns you off when somebody is pitching to come on to your show as a guest, because we've got a lot of folks in here who want to get on podcasts.
What turns me off? Okay. All right. I'm going to speak open and honest and candid. And I think that'll help. I think that would be more beneficial than for me to sugarcoat anything. And I'll speak from other standpoints too, because I know a handful of radio hosts and podcast hosts. And I think when it comes to someone pitching, maybe someone that's not properly prepared, or someone that's not ready to be interviewed, that's probably one of the most challenging. And I don't mean someone that doesn't have experience. Like, you can come on a show, and we've all started out without experience. So when someone comes on that's not really prepared for an interview, they don't, let's say, for example, they don't have something they want to talk about. They just think it's a great idea. Like, oh, I heard I should be on other people's shows. They don't really have a niche to talk to or talk about. They don't have an audience. They don't really have a product or service. They're just like, here I am. I think people should hear me talk. And myself and other hosts will probably be glad to tell you that that's not something that we want to talk about.
Yeah, I sense a lot of ego in that. That's somebody saying, that's ego saying my voice should be heard because I have a voice and because I have a message, but not thinking about the value, not thinking about your time, not thinking about the show and what the show offers. Just totally, ego, right?
That's right. It's just like, listen to me. I want to be heard. And there's no planning. There's no thought process behind that. And I think that's selfish. And sometimes I use selfish in a positive manner, but I think that's selfish to audiences. Like, that owns person's audience, if they have one at all, the audience that a host has worked hard to develop. And it's not doesn't really have anyone else's concern or benefit in mind other than themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's, I guess when you come to that person, you're already in interview mode, right? Or is that before interview mode when they're pitching in an email or Facebook message? At what point do you recognize that ego slipping in and it's all about them?
Well, hopefully you figure that out beforehand. And that's something that a host has to pay attention to, because you get a countless number of requests coming through. Everyone wants to be interviewed. Everybody wants to be on a show. So you have to sift through that. And that's what's challenging, because you get 100 pitches in a month and you sift through them and see what's different and what stands out. And then you look at someone's pitch and you look at their bio, if they have one. You look at their website, their social media, and that's the research that you have to go through. And then you have someone that doesn't have anything. Like, we have to understand, when you're approaching a host, you have to have something to offer. What are you offering? And if there's nothing to offer, then you have to spend time, and sometimes it takes years, building your audience and building trust, and then you'll be ready to reach out to be on a bigger platform.
So that brings me to my other point. What in a package? So they're sending you an email, they're sending you a message. What are you looking for in that? Of course, I'm assuming, and I know this to be true, the speaker bio really helps, because at least they've come up with what they want to offer, and you can read a quick bio and it takes some time off of your hands. Am I right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. A quick bio. So sometimes someone will send you 4 pages on everything they've done in their whole life. And you're like, how am I supposed to sift through this and 50 other people, in the next couple of weeks to find someone to interview? So that's not going to work out. It does help if someone puts together a short bio and a long bio. Mm-hmm. But most hosts are going to look at the short bio. And then for me personally, I go and look at, I'm not sure if every host would do this, but my show is also for radio as well as podcast. But I take a lot of pride in the guests that I put on the show, and also the quality that I'm bringing to my audience, because that's my audience. I've worked hard to build them and grow them and offer the best content I can. So if someone puts together a short bio, that is going to be more beneficial than 4 pages of a whole bunch of rambling of not a whole lot of interesting information, to be honest with you.
Right. So just give us the golden nuggets of who you are, figure out the speaker bio so it's very clear for the host. What else can they say in their, and I'm assuming you get a lot through Facebook messages, I want to get on your show, or I noticed this was interesting, and you probably get a lot of other stuff too, but what could they say in a Facebook message that would get your interest to at least allow them to be in the running?
Well, okay, let me take a step back and just mention a one-sheeter. And I'm sure, Bafta, you know exactly what a one-sheeter is. That's part of the business. So if you're working with publicists, like I work with publishing houses, individual publicists, and they know the process, and maybe some listeners just trying to get on the show may not know. So a one-sheeter is golden. You need a one-sheeter. And I don't know if you've shared one. I've just got into your group, Bafta. I looked around a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to share an example of a one-sheeter, but it's one sheet. That's it. So it's one sheet of a short bio, some of the things that you've accomplished, a picture, and your social media. And that's going to take you leaps and bounds above most people that just randomly send out requests to hosts that aren't really sure where to go or where to start. So start with the one sheeter. That's going to make your life a whole lot easier getting on or approaching hosts to get on shows.
Absolutely. So the one sheeter is one thing. Anything in the actual message that you would say is going to catch your attention? Maybe I listened to your last episode of your radio show. I loved how you interviewed so-and-so. How about the idea of coming up with an angle for you, helping the host out with, hey, I noticed you interviewed Joe Schmo. What about this angle? Does that help you make your decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just goes above and beyond. That goes from sending out a mass email to as many podcasting hosts that you could find in the 2 hours that you set aside, and actually standing out and being someone that's willing to put in time and effort. I think that that's a big step when it comes to approaching, because I think we have to understand that podcast hosts, and like some podcast hosts have been on way longer than I have. And they've been dedicated to their show, and they've put in so much time and effort. They've built their audience. So if you get a random email that from someone that hasn't done any research, may have never even heard your show or took the time to listen, that's not going to turn any heads. That's not going to benefit anyone, certainly not the host, and not you for trying to get on their show.
So great. So we've got the one sheeter, which is super important for anyone who's trying to speak more. I mean, podcasts on a stage. I even have a sheet that's longer than one sheet. So it depends on the person that describes more of what I do. But yes, a one sheeter is a great idea, offering some value in your pitch, an angle that the host might be interested in, which means that you have had to have listened to the host, to definitely do that. Just to recap, you want to make sure you listen to the host. Do you ever have fans that you bring on? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. And you know what the thing is, you mentioned about experience. So one of your questions was, will you bring someone on that doesn't have experience? And to be honest with you, I love bringing people on that haven't been on shows before or have only been on a couple, because they're brand new. I call them green. Like, they're excited. They have life in their eyes. And I've brought on a few bigger name guests that it's just interview after interview. They're not excited. They're not interested. They want to get through. I don't know, maybe their publicist sent them over. They want to get through the interview, and that's it. So for me, I like to have conversation. I like to make connections. The reason I do radio or interviews is because I like to make connections and share people's story with other people. So I'm genuinely interested in people's stories, and that's important to share and express and let people know that we can have a bigger platform to share those stories. So for me, it doesn't have to be a big name guest. It just has to be someone that's interested and wants to share their story, is excited and passionate about it.
And that brings me to my next point, which is really, Drew, how important is having a crafted story, a crafted message to getting on podcasts. And like you said, you have one podcast and radio show, but a lot of other podcast hosts by this point. So how important is it to have that crafted story? Because that's what we talk about in this group, and that's what I specialize in, is storytelling. How important is that in getting on the shows? It's
everything. It's absolutely everything. People want to know your story. Like, that's why I'm on this. That's why I'm on here. People want to know how I got a radio show and what the steps I took. It took me, I started off with a 15-minute show, and that turned into a 30-minute show on one station. Now we're on 7 stations across the country. And after 100 shows, we turned that into a podcast. And now we're over 400 shows, which is crazy to think about now. But that's what people want to hear. That's a story. For me, I traveled for 10 years as a professional athlete. I slept on buses. Someone told us when to wake up, when to go to sleep. I traveled from Australia to Germany, all over the US. Like, that's a story people want to hear. And I hope that doesn't sound, I'm patting myself on the back, but every single person has a story that's unique and individual to them. So if someone, that's why the original stories mean so much. If you want to replicate someone, or if you're trying to be someone that you're not, it's going to be very difficult to tell that unique story that people want to hear. And if you tell that story enough, people are going to start inviting you on without even having to do anything.
Exactly. Because you put yourself out there with your story, with your uniqueness, your authenticity. So it makes total sense. I talk to a lot of people who want to be speakers, and some of them are in this group too. And we talk about being speakers. And I always say, start with your story. Like, know what you're going to bring value to a stage. And then, naturally, you're automatically, in my opinion, a better speaker when you own your story. But a lot of people want to do it reverse. I want to get paid. I want to be a speaker. I'm like, know your story, know what value you're going to bring. And a lot of that other stuff will come naturally because people will be drawn to you. Do you agree with that? And that's it's my perspective on it.
No question. No question. You have to be in, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. You have to be in touch with yourself. You have to know your own story. And if you don't know your own story, then you're not gonna be able to tell it to other people. And some people are brand new, and it's perfectly fine. I remember very clearly how it was to be brand new. I know what it's like to not know when you're going to get paid. I have a pretty cool story of how I started out my business running fitness classes. I didn't know how Facebook worked. I didn't know, this was almost 10 years ago. So Facebook was pretty new to most people.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to market. I didn't know. I put up a few posters, told a few people. I showed up at a park. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited to run these fitness classes. No one showed up. So the next day I showed up again, waiting for people to show up. Next day, no one showed up. It was the fall. It was raining, half snowing in Canada. And I stood there so embarrassed and crushed that no one would show up for my classes. And from there, I went to knock on doors because failure wasn't good enough for me. So I started knocking on doors, asking business owners to send their employees as office building, as a employee building idea.
Smart. Yeah. Very, creative.
Mm-hmm. And that's just something that I had to do. I had to succeed in some way, but that's how I got started. And people love to hear that story because everyone fails. Everyone fails. And if you just tell your glamour stories, that's not going to interest a ton of people because we want to know about failure. We want to be able to connect with our audience. And if you could find your own unique story and get good at telling it, people are going to love to hear it. And even if you don't think it's a great story, it is, because it's your story.
Right. Just own it. Own that it's your story. Yeah, the key pieces of vulnerability, which I'm always talking about in this group, but just being vulnerable is actually what attracts people to you. But so many of us are like, no to vulnerability, kind of put your hand up, strong arm, vulnerability, but it's not the case, So it's great to hear you and your perspective, being a seasoned podcast and radio host, just how you've come along, even in your own journey, and you have your own story. And here you are, we met through, a podcast group. So, and here you are live in my group, and that's the beauty of the internet and connections. So, I'm so glad that you were able to be on here today and to just give us these tips and these nuggets of advice. Is there anything I left out that you definitely want to touch on?
I don't know if you have a time limit here, but I'll be brief.
No, go ahead.
I just want to mention that finding podcast hosts to connect with on different levels. So we mentioned just briefly about how to get on a show. And I think that if you reach out in different ways, like I had someone that was brand new and they tweeted about my show. They loved the show. So I followed them and I paid attention to what they were doing. And they actually ended up putting out a really cool blog post that I read, and it resonated with everything I believe in. So I invited them on. And it started off with as simple as a little Twitter. I think it was 2 lines, a little Twitter post. Mm-hmm. So that could definitely help. And then just taking interest in what that individual is doing. I think sometimes we just want to send out a bunch of emails, a bunch of messages. Can I come on your show? But if you actually take interest in that individual and help them out, like, what do you have to offer? What can you give? That's definitely going to make a big difference. And I think that if we're building relationships, if we have the mindset of building relationships and working together, we can develop a relationship. Sometimes I'll have someone on the show and then I'll get a message from them a couple of years later and they'll say, hey, I got this new book. Can I come back on? And I'm like, where have you been?
Yeah.
I haven't seen like a message from you. I haven't seen a like or a retweet, like nothing. And just out of the blue, it's like, hey, can you help me out? I got this new book. Will you promote it? And I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work out for us.
Yeah. Oh, again, all about them. It's kind of, it goes back to this ego of, hey, I got a book, I got a voice, put me on, without doing some of the due diligence. Like you said, I love the point of building a relationship, because that's what it comes down to is relationships. So I love that you mentioned that. And I think that it's also important, and I know we didn't touch on this too deep, but just to also, think about how you can reach out to somebody in your niche, someone who's within that space that you're working in. We have a lot of coaches in this group, a lot of people doing different things, but think about how broad you could go. When we talk about health, for example, we're probably also, I'm sure you touch on mindset, especially as a former athlete. So maybe somebody who's a mindset coach may be able to give your audience some value, right? Mindset and energy and all that you're doing. So just figuring out all the different spectrums is my point, that somebody that a host could find value in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just making connections. And it's just being I'm reading this book by the Dalai Lama. He's celebrating his birthday with Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Something about joy they're talking about, and they talk about just being a human being. That's where you find that joy. Where you find that internal happiness. And I think that if we're going to make these connections and we want to be on other people's shows, we should find a real connection instead of mass emails or random messages. Like, why not connect with them on a deeper level, see if you can build a relationship, and then maybe you can offer their audience, or maybe they could offer your audience some value. It doesn't have to be one way, and it really shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. And I agree with that. It should be some type of give and take. And then it doesn't always have to be immediate. Wouldn't you agree? Like, follow them for a little bit. Fine. You'd be surprised how accessible people are on Facebook. You can add them as a friend and just follow them and see if you even resonate with what they're posting, and comment on a few of their posts. Get to know them, I think, like you said, before you just go into always this pitch mode of, mass emails. So that makes sense to me. Totally what you're saying, it comes back to relationships. So
I mean, it's kind of like when you're at a party or some kind of marketing event and someone hands you their business card before they even say anything. And I think we could probably both agree that's happened.
Oh, more times than I can count. I'm like, wait, who are you? What do you do? Wait, can you just, give me a second to digest so I can know whose card this is? Exactly. It's same thing with go to a coffee shop and somebody just says, you should buy this from me, or you should. It's just so in your face. It's a turn off. It's like, whoa, hold on a second here. I just walked in, can I catch a breath? So I think it's the same concept of just leaning back a little bit, maybe just taking your time, not thinking that the result has to be immediate. Because if we're honest here, this is a long-term game. I mean, somebody could be on podcasts every month if they wanted to. Just treat it like a long-term game, not I need to increase my visibility right this moment, this week, otherwise I failed, which I think is the tendency for a lot of folks to get into when they're trying to get on a show. So, everything that you're saying today, I totally agree with. And I think it's powerful because it's a reminder to people that just to slow down for a second, build the relationship, know your story, own your story, offer value first. And these are all the things that, Drew, you've been saying during our, 30 or 40 minutes together.
Yeah, we're on the same page 100%. I think if we could develop better relationships, and, you said it was a long-term game, that like the show, I'm not going anywhere. I just had 2 conversations with syndicated companies. Like, we're growing. So if someone is more interested in having a long-term relationship, then we'll have them on the show now. We'll have them on next year and in 5 years. Like, that's a real relationship. And that's what you could bring to the table if you're willing to play that long game, like you mentioned.
And do some due diligence. So there you go. Well, thank you so much, Drew, for your time today, for your expertise. We wish you the best of luck. And remind folks how they can follow you, Drew, and also give your podcast a shout out. All your golden nuggets there. Give it to us.
Okay. Thanks so much, Bafta. I appreciate it. Just let me mention real quick before you let me go. I love that book behind you. The One Thing.
The One Thing. Yeah, that's my jam. I've got a couple, but that Relentless is also a really good one. I think as an athlete. Have you read that?
I have not.
Oh, you would, especially as an athlete. And I say this because you're going to relate to it, because it's the fitness coach. Well, he's really, I don't know if he's a mindset coach. He's the coach who coached Michael Jordan.
Oh,
Okay. He's
wow.
the one who would, in crutch moments, get that. So relentless, write it down.
I got
I
it.
tell everyone about it. I've actually listened to the audio version so I can do some walking at the same time and, knock out two things.
Nice.
Highly recommend. And please let me know how you like it when you're done with it, because I'd love to hear how people, enjoy the book. But yeah, go ahead. And I interrupted. Please shoot us your Instagram, your Facebook, however you want people to connect with you.
Sure. So my Facebook is True Form Life. It's facebook.com/Trueform Life. We're pretty active on there. A couple posts go up a day, and that's more about lifestyle, nutrition, fitness. So if any of your audience is looking for those types of posts or information, our main website is trueformlife.com. That's the main website that everything is on. So that's our hub where we share workouts, fitness routines. My radio show / podcast goes on there. Goes on there as well. And that's called Exploring Mind and Body. So if anyone wants to check that out, it's a holistic show around nutrition, fitness, lifestyle. That's everything that we do. So if anyone would like to check the show out, we have a free app on any Apple device. And then it's on every podcasting platform as well. So, and Bafta, I just want to thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. And I really love speaking to new and inspired young entrepreneurs that are kind of getting in the game. And I love it. I love sharing inspiration, my stories of failure, and to let them know that we've all been there, we've all struggled, and that there is hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. And if you make sacrifices and you set your goals and set your sights high, you can achieve without question.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Drew, for being on here. I will say that author Steve Sims, one thing he says about the word failure, because you just mentioned it, he says, if all of us could, instead of using failure, call it discovery, wouldn't that be so much better? So you were in discovery phases a few times instead of failure phases, So anyway, all right. We want to end on that note, Drew, really thank you for being on here. And listen, folks, if you guys enjoyed this, please comment below. Of course, it's my dog scratching at my door. If anyone hears it, if you've enjoyed this, comment below. Make sure you follow Drew, support what he's doing, all the positive vibes that he's setting out related to mind, body, health. We love it. And all right, we will check out of this live Facebook and talk to y'all later. I'm going to shut down.